Good afternoon, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Judges. We are now in chapter 6. Just for a quick recap, in the previous chapter, we read about the song of Devorah and Barak. And in that song, it lifted up the glory and majesty and the power of God to remind the Israelites how God, during the times of trouble, had raised up the judge, Devorah, to lead them to take care of a very major enemy, King Yabin. And at the end of chapter 5, there was no more talk about King Yabim's influence over Israel. Now, the song was actually penned so much so that the Israelites are to remind themselves how God has been with them. And we are told that they had uh, peace, they had no trouble for 40 years. Now, when we get to chapter 6, we find a series of things that has happened all through from chapters 2 onwards, quite regularly. And this is this phrase here. And then, this would be an and then after the 40 years, the children of Israel did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Now, always remember 40 years is a long time. There will be at least 1 to 2 generations of people. And as the generations of people came and gone, they forgot what happened 40 years ago. And so this word is Ra. This is evil in the eyes of God. And so, if you recall, I've kept mentioning that, evil is from the perspective, from the viewpoint of the person who is looking at the event. And so, in the eyes of God, Jehovah, so God looked at what they are doing and God considers that evil. And as a result, this word so is and then. As a result, God gave them up into the hand of Midian for 7 years. And so this idea of give them, delivered is actually to give, right? Meaning God says, well, if the Midianites want to come in, go ahead. And that's the idea of give. It means that at that point in time, the people of Midian became very powerful, and God allowed the Midianites to come and stop and put an end to the peace and tranquility of the lives of the Israelites. That's what it means. And because God saw what they did. Now, always think of this. The idea of did means to do things. Not that they thought evil. Now, it doesn't mean that when you do evil, you don't think evil. Obviously, that's the case. But God punishes on the doing and not on the thinking. On the thinking before they do it, they still have time to repent. But when they put it into action, it will be judged. And so God judged them to have done evil in his eyes. And as God judged them, we are told that the Midianites came and had power over the Israelites or the children of Israel for 7 years. Now, this number 7 is important. We'll come back to that a little later. And so it says here, when God delivered them into the hand of the hand of the Midian prevailed against Israel. Now, what does this mean? All we have here is an A and a B. So we have an A here, starting from here, and then we have a B here that ends here. So giving them to Midian also says that Midianites were strong over them. And so because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made for themselves the dens, the caves, and the strongholds which are in the mountains. So what does that mean? I think we need to understand that the Midianites are the type of people that were very aggressive against the Israelites. And so they have to make themselves hiding places. Hiding places. So when we talk about the den is a place to store things, the caves in the mountains, and also in the strongholds. Strongholds literally means a hole, right? A hole. So you find all these ideas is to hide from the Midianites. Why? Well, we are told in verse 3, whatever or whenever Israel had sown, what that means is the Midianites, the Israelites would scatter seeds, would plant, and will grow. The Midianites would come up and they will take everything that they have sown. So would the Amalekites, and so would the people of the east would come up against them. Now, we need to understand this idea. This is Israel, right? This is the Dead Sea, and this is Galilee, right? Let's put it this way. What we find is that the Midianites come from this other place, and this would be Arabia. And so people from this side went into Israel, and this is people from the east. So the Midianites, the Amalekites, and people from the east all came in. Now, they didn't occupy Israel. So what did they do? They will come in, they would take, and then they will go back. They will come in, they will take, and then they will go back. And so they never had peace in this period of time. They would encamp against them, destroy the produce of earth as far as Gaza, leave no sustenance for Israel. No sustenance means nothing to keep life going, nothing to preserve life, nothing to preserve life. Now, you need to know from the Bible's viewpoint, the thing that sustains life is food, right? And so there's no sheep, no ox, no donkey. Whenever you've got an animal in pasture, they come, they would take the livestock and their tents. And they come like locusts, a lot of them. Both they and their camels were without number, uncountable. They would enter the land, and it says here to destroy it. The idea of destroy it is to make it into nothing. They have taken everything away. So Israel was greatly impoverished, and impoverished means they had little. I guess the word here literally means they have little to nothing. And all because the Midianites and they had come down and taken everything from them. And now they turned to God. The children of Israel called out to God for help. When they forgot God, God gave them into the hands of the Midianites, and it was for a period of 7 years. And so in verse 7, we are told that it came to pass when the children of Israel cried out or called out to God for help because of the Midianites, it appears that they did not fully repent. They just wanted help. And so what we read in verse 8 is that God sent a prophet to the children of Israel, and it was not that God sent a judge to deliver them. God sent a prophet to warn them, to teach them, and not to rescue them. So, what help did God give? God gave them help to teach them to repent. And the prophet says, thus says the Lord God of Israel. This is what God says. I brought you up from Egypt. Now understand, remember this up. Egypt is lower than Canaan. That's what it means. And brought you out of the house of bondage. Now, this word bondage is servanthood, not slavery, servanthood. Now, what does servant mean? Servant means you will listen to the master, and the master had authority over them in Egypt. So the Egyptians were the master. And so God says, I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians. The idea of deliver is to rescue. I rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of all who oppressed you, and I drove them out before you and gave you their land, which is now they are there. They have carved it out into 12 parts, and God assigned it to them. Also, I said to you, I, the Lord your God. Now, this is important. It says, Ani Yehovah Elohim. I, I am the Lord your God. Do not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. They went in, they conquered the land, and they are gods of the Amorites. And in those days, whichever god is more powerful, they will win the battle. And in this case, Jehovah, your God, he had given the Israelites the ability to win the battles. And then God complained about them. You have not obeyed my voice. You did not hear what I tell you. And so the intent is for them to turn around back to God. That's what the prophet is supposed to do. Now, in verse 11, you need to pay attention to this idea called Malach Yehovah. The word Malach, it is commonly translated as angel or messenger. Angel is good, but the idea here is someone who walks on behalf of another. And since this is Malach Yehovah, then this is the angel who walks on behalf of Jehovah, God. So that's why it's called the angel of the Lord. It's the angel, a very specific angel that is sent to do the bidding and speak on behalf of another, and in this case, the Lord, God himself. And so everything the angel says is as if God was speaking. And he came, he sat under the tree which was in Ophrah. Right? This is the place in Ophrah in verse 11, which belonged to Joash. Joash is somebody from H3, right? This is H3. It's not Abis right. Let me just write this down. They would be the Azurite, right? The Azurite. Azurite, right? Right. The last few letters here, Azurite. And this is the clan that Joash was in there. And he is actually, later we'll find out, he is from the tribe of Manasseh. And his son is what we are interested in. And his son is Gideon, right? Gideon. And Gideon was threshing wheat in the wine press in order to hide from the Midianites. And we may not be aware that you should know wheat is never done in the wine press in the house. The wheat is actually at a threshing floor. But if you do the threshing floor, then the husk will be flying all over the place. And you'll be telling the Midianites that you have wheat with you. So when you go into the wine press and it's a big, how should we say, we could call it, we could see it this way. Let me draw this out. It's a big log, and the log has a big stone to press. And so this would normally be for the grapes, to press the grapes so that the juice will come out and they will collect the juice. But instead of the grapes, he is using it for wheat. And so he has to do a lot of work to lift this up and to press it down. And so Gideon is doing this on behalf of the father Joash. And so Gideon is a very filial son, I guess you could say. And he took the role to take care of the family. And so he was hiding, he was doing this. So in case the Midianites come, the father can escape. And he is doing this to feed the family. This is a very important job, but it's done in secret. And so the angel of the Lord, Malach Yehovah, showed himself to him and said to him, and this is what was said, Yehovah is with you. So it says here, Yehovah imka, you mighty man of valor. Now God is calling him a strong man. A strong man. And it says here, you have strength, and you are brave, right? Strong and brave. You dare do this while the Midianites are storming around. So Gideon is seen by God and relayed by the angel of God, or angel of the Lord, that you are a mighty man of valor. You are a hero. And then Gideon said to him, he says, "Oh my Lord, if the Lord is with us." Notice this word is if. That's like a condition. You mean God is with us? Now, why is he saying this? Because it's the first time Gideon ever met an angel of God. And how did he know it was the angel of God? Well, the angel of God said, "The Lord is with you." Now, so Jehovah is with him. And so this angel that Gideon never saw talks about the Lord or Jehovah. And so he says here in verse 13, he says, "Oh, Adoni, if Jehovah is really Immanuel with us," and they have been reading the Exodus, I guess, "why then has all this happened to us?" And they were wondering if God saved them out of Egypt, brought them into the promised land, conquered the place. What is happening? Why are they being harassed by the Midianites that everyone is hiding? And then it says, "Where are all his miracles which our fathers told us about?" Now, told us. This is oral tradition. The things that happened in the past, and it's called miracles. And this word here is something difficult to understand, right? Difficult to understand is miracles. It cannot be explained how God brought us up from Egypt. And so that whole episode, when they read about the Exodus, was incredible. Why would God do that? And so he says, "Oh my Lord, you angel of the Lord, if Jehovah is truly with us, what is this? We are hiding from the Midianites. But now the Lord has forsaken us." The word forsaken us literally means abandon. Natash means to cast away. It looks like God has abandoned us and has given us into the hands of the Midianites. We can't fight them. And then the Lord turned to him and said, now, this is where many people will falter. This is as if God speaking, as if God is speaking. And I want us to be very clear that this is the angel of the Lord. This is the angel of the Lord speaking on behalf of God. And if you recall in the old days, the Shengzi, when the emperor is supposed to go and speak to somebody far away, he writes a letter. And that imperial edict is carried by the eunuch or the general. And when the general speaks and reads the Shengzi, the imperial edict, everybody has a bow down as if the emperor is present. Well, everything that the servant speaks on behalf of the emperor is really the speech of the emperor for all intents and purposes. And that's what the Malach is saying. God is speaking, go into this might, the strength of yours, and you shall save Israel. Now, what does it mean to save Israel? You are there to help Israel. Deliver them from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you? And so the question here is very surprising to Gideon. Who am I really? That you suddenly appear and tell me that I'm the strong hero. And so he said to him, "Oh my Lord," in verse 15, he says, as if God was speaking, "Oh Adonai, how can I save Israel?" Now you notice this conversation is taken between the angel of the Lord speaking on behalf of God to Gideon. He says, "Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh." Manasseh says, "I'm really from a clan that doesn't have power. I am the least in my father's house." Now, in verse 15, it's very important for us to realize that he sees himself as the youngest. But in verse 15, the idea of young is also fairly helpless. I have no authority. So what do you want me to do? Right? I have no money. I'm the youngest. I listen to other people. I am the weakest. Now, God or the angel of God speaking on behalf of God, so it comes out as Jehovah saying, "Surely I will be with you. I will be with you, and you shall defeat the Midianites as one man." Now, this is the miracle that God is saying. Gideon will do this. Now, you need to read what Gideon says. And then Gideon said to him, "If now I have found favor in your eyes." Understand this? This is eyes. Favor good, evil, everything is in the eyes of the beholder. If I found favor in your eyes, he says, then show me a sign. Now, verse 17, the idea of sign is ut, right? Ut. And a sign literally means an indication. Indication. Now, mind you, this is not about superstition. It's it's to have something that is definite. How do I prove that this is really what God wants me to do? That was Gideon's idea, talking to the angel of the Lord, that it is you, Jehovah, who talk with me, that you are speaking with me. So don't leave, don't depart from here. I pray. I pray means I'm asking you until I come to you and bring out my offering and set it before you. So, who is this you? He is speaking to God, or the text shows that he's speaking to God, but he's actually having a conversation with the angel of Jehovah. So, you must be able to comprehend that. He said, I will wait until you come back. And so, the angel of the Lord speaking on behalf of God says, yep, I'll be here. I'll be here. And so Gideon went in, prepared a young goat, unleavened bread from an ephah of flour. That's a lot of flour. The meat he put in a basket. He put the broth in a pot. He brought them out to him under the terebinth tree. Who is this him under the terebinth tree? The angel of God. And so he's speaking as if he's God, right? And presented them and the angel of God. So this him is the angel of God. Notice? Speaking on behalf of God, said to him, take the meat and the unleavened bread and lay them on this rock and pour out the broth. Verse 20. It's quite an interesting thing that this pour out the broth is like Elijah, is to pour out on the meat and bread. Elijah on Mount Carmel, he told the 450 prophets of Baal that he challenged them and they couldn't get Baal to send fire. He actually he actually got his own offering, the sacrifice, and he poured water over it, and God sent fire. So this is a repeat of that moment, and Gideon did that. And then, so the moment you see then is this, and then after he has wet the entire offering, the angel of the Lord put out the end of a staff that was in his hand. He touched the meat and the unleavened bread, and then it, poof, the fire rose out of the rock. Now, this fire suddenly came out is to show that there is a spontaneous fire, a spontaneous combustion that happened, right? That happened. And it came out on the wet items of the sacrifice. Now, this word here, consume, in 21, is to eat. Fire eats. When the fire eats, it burns up the meat and the unleavened bread. And then the angel of the Lord left his view. Now, what does this mean? It says here, and the angel of the Lord walked away out of his eyes, or from his eyes, till Gideon could not see. That is what happened. This is a form of a miracle. He can't understand how can you put broth and wet the offering, and suddenly the fire came out from the rock and consumed. It's like God eating up the food. Verse 22. Noun, and this is and then. After that episode, Gideon perceived. Now understand this idea. This perceive is saw and understood. Gideon saw what happened, and now he understood that that person that he was talking to was truly the angel or the Malach Jehovah. So Gideon said, "Oh dear, alas is uh aha," right? It's like an interjection. Oh dear. And he says, "Oh dear," in verse 22, uh, Adonai Jehovah. So Adonai Jehovah. Let me just put this down. This is Adonai, and this is Jehovah. Two words referring to God. O Lord, the Lord, right? For I have seen, remember, perceived is to see. I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. Now, what is so great about the angel of the Lord? Because the angel of the Lord represents the Lord, represents Jehovah. Now, the conversation moved on. It says, and then God said to him, now God says this, Shalom Laka, peace be with you. And this word peace is Shalom. God wished him peace. Do not be afraid. You shall not die, because I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face, as if I have seen God, because he speaks for God. And then God says, no, 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 don't worry. But now I want you to do something that is really strange. Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and called it, the Lord is peace. To this day, it is still in Ophrah, in the Ezerites. So, what is this name? This name is Jehovah Shalom. He has peace. He is complete. He is not destroyed, even though he has seen the angel of God face to face, as if he was seeing God. And God says, that's not an equivalent. You are fine, Gideon. You didn't actually see my face. Verse 25, and then this happened the same night. And so notice this at night, and this very strange to do all this at night. That God said to him. Now, how did God say to him? I don't really know. Could be that he has seen a vision of God. In this case, there's no more angel to speak to him. And it's more of a direct conversation. Take your father's young bull. Now, is to take your father's bull. This bull is actually meant for sacrifice. Then it says here, take your father's second bull of 7 years old. Now, this 7 years old is likely that this bull was raised at the time of Midian. And when Midian started to oppress them, the father actually had a young bull. So now it's 7 years old because it's 7 years. God is listening to their cries. And so the instruction is this: tear down, break down the altar of Baal that your father has. Now, the father has become an idolater. So the father has an altar to Baal. The second thing here was to cut down the wooden image that is beside it. And this wooden image is called the Asherah. Asherah. This is a female goddess, and it's a wooden block of wood. It says, build an altar to Jehovah your God on top of this rock in the proper arrangement. What rock? Well, the rock of the altar of Baal. Replace it. Now he doesn't want the first bull, he wants a second bull of 7 years old. Offer a burnt sacrifice with the wood of the Asherah, which you shall cut down. So basically, what he did was everything he had was not done in Shiloh. So God wanted him to do a very special offering, and this offering will upset the entire community. And so we read here that Gideon took 10 men from among his servants and did as the Lord said to him, but very quietly, because he feared his father's household, because he broke his father's altar. And the men of the city, too much to do it by day. The people will say they'll be upset to break the altar, break the Asherah, and then cut the Asherah down so that it becomes wood to burn the offering. And so he did it by night when everybody was asleep. In verse 28, he says, when the men of the city rose early in the morning, they woke up and saw the altar of Baal broken down. The wooden image was beside it, was cut down. The second bull was on the altar burning. And they said to one another, who has done this? And when they had inquired and asked, they said, well, this must be Gideon, the son of Joash. He has done this thing. So the men of the city said to Joash, bring out your son. We will not pass judgment on him, that he must die, because he has torn down the altar of Baal. He has defamed our God, because he has cut down the wooden image that was beside it, and then he burned that wooden Asherah. Now comes the interesting part. But Joash, the father, said to all who stood against him. So we need to understand this idea is to stand against is to contend against. It says here, would you plead for Baal? This would be contend. Contend. Argue for Baal. Are you going to argue for Baal? Would you save him? What do you mean, will you save him? Can you help him? This is not really safe. This is, can you help him? Liberate him. And then it says, let the one who would plead for Baal, and this word plead is also to contend. And this word contend is to, I guess you could say, quarrel. Quarrel against. If anyone quarrels against Baal, he should be put to death. And this is a very serious crime. He should be put to death by morning. And then if he is a god, what does that mean? If Baal is a god, then let Baal argue for himself, because his altar had been torn down. So let Baal defend himself. Therefore, on that day, the father Joash called Gideon Jerubbaal. Jerubbaal means the one who quarreled against Baal. So Gideon had a quarrel against Baal, saying, and the father said, let Baal plead. Let Baal, well, I guess you can say, let Baal contend for himself, argue for himself, because Gideon had torn down Baal's altar, right? Gideon had torn down Baal's altar. So the father, being an idolater, was very defensive of the son. And he says, you don't have to touch my son. If you have a contention, you can't argue for Baal. If Baal is real, then let Baal fight against Gideon. If not, there's nothing we can do. And by this method, Gideon was spared by the people, because the people dare not touch Gideon because the idols were all fake. Verse 33, and then all the Midianites, the Amalekites, the people of the east gathered together. They crossed over and camped in the valley of Jezreel. The valley of Jezreel is at the plains of Megiddo. It is a flat ground where many people use for fighting battles. It says, but the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon. Now, what does this mean? Came upon Gideon. Verse 34. Now, in verse 34, it actually says clothed, not came upon. Clothed. The Spirit of God is seen as the presence of God, and he enveloped, right? He was enveloping Gideon as if he was wearing something. And then Gideon blew the shofar, right? The shofar. In a call for war. And the Ezrahites gathered behind him. He sent messengers throughout all of Manasseh, and they gathered behind him. He also sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, those who were staying there at the Galilee area. They came up to meet them. Verse 36 to verse 40 is the last sector. Gideon hasn't gone out to fight. We will read more about it next week. And it says here, so Gideon said to God, if you, God, will deliver, rescue Israel by my hand, as you have said, then you shall look at this. I will put a small fleece. Now, the word fleece here in verse 37 is a fleece of wool. This is a skin of a sheep. Since I'm going to put it on the threshing floor. The threshing floor has nothing because he was doing his threshing at the wine press, hiding. If there is dew on the fleece only and dry on all the ground around, then I shall know that you will deliver Israel by my hand. And then he said, and it was so. When he arose the next morning, squeezed the fleece together, he wrung the dew out of the fleece, a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, do not be angry, but let me speak just one more time. Let me test, I pray. Now, this idea, test, really talks about press. Well, let me press again. And the idea of press again is quite an interesting uh concept. In verse 39 says, let me test. I pray just one more time. This word test is to speak. Let me speak. I pray just one more time. With the fleece, said, let it now be dry only on the fleece, but on all the ground, let there be dew. So let's be the reverse. So what we find is this. We find that in the first instance, we have the fleece, and the fleece is very much a sheepskin, right? A sheepskin. And so we want to know that if there is dew here, the first one is dew here, and then all around is dry. And so it happened. And then he says, let me do one more time with the fleece. Let it now be dry only on the fleece, and then on all the ground, let there be dew. So we find that in the first part, it is let the fleece be wet and the ground be dry. Now, in the second instance, it works this way. Let the fleece be dry. Now, this is a bit challenging because the fleece will have been dry, and then the ground to be wet. And that would be the sign. Because it was done in such a way where it can be mutually exclusive. If it is true, then everything will be known. If it's not true, then maybe the angel of the Lord will disappear. And so what happened was we read in both accounts. When he rose, there was water in the fleece, a bowl full. And then God did it in the night. The fleece was dry, but dew was on the ground. So the ground around was wet with dew, not rain, wet with dew. And so in so doing, we saw that Gideon, as an individual, was unsure if he had met the angel of the Lord, had asked the angel of the Lord to explain to Gideon why has God abandoned them. But in so doing, Gideon eventually realizes that he was a strong man and a mighty hero that God is about to unleash on the armies of Midian. And we read that the armies of Midian were huge, but the armies that God wanted from Gideon is small. And with this, we need to be mindful. Don't take this example and make it into a personal thing. This only represents what Gideon did, right? It wasn't so much for the general public, but we could see that God is at work in chapter 36 through the language that's been given to us, that in this old tradition that's passed down. And whatever God did in Egypt, Gideon didn't understand why it is not happening again. And here it's been shown clearly that Gideon is the person chosen by God to deliver the Israelites from the oppression of the Midianites. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.
mold